You are listening to the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For today's episode, I had the opportunity to interview Kayla Ihrig. Kayla is a digital nomad and the author of the upcoming nonfiction book, How to Be a Digital Nomad. I'm here with Kayla Ihrig, who is the author of How to Be a Digital Nomad. Kayla, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Hi, Aaron. Thank you for having me.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, I have a book on digital nomadism coming out in January, and I have been freelance writing for about 10 years, and I've been supporting myself and my freelance writing business actually supports both me and my husband as we travel full-time. So we're just drifting around the world right now, writing around and, having a good time of it.
Now, how many countries have you lived in or visited?
I actually just counted. I have been to 30 countries.
Wow. Without spoiling too much of your upcoming book, How to Be a Digital Nomad, what will your book be about, and is there a release date set?
Yes. So for most of the world, it comes out on January 3rd, but for North America, it's being released January 30th. And it's just a reaction to how many people are interested in working remotely and traveling, since it used to be seen as kind of an alternative lifestyle, but since the pandemic, the interest has really exploded. And now a lot of people are looking to figure out that equation. How do they get more out of their, career if they want it, if they want to, instead of going to the office every day, to be able to work from anywhere in the world? How do they make that happen? So it's a practical guide, but it's filled with interviews with digital nomads spanning 5 decades. So it's a really kind of comprehensive look at the lifestyle and how it's evolved from the 1980s when personal computers or portable computers were released to the 1990s with in-home internet, and then the early 2000s was the invention of, the era of home Wi-Fi and internet cafes, and then, the 2010s where Wi-Fi is everywhere, in the 2020s where now everyone has Wi-Fi, and almost so many people are able to work online since the pandemic. So it's just following that whole, evolution of the lifestyle and helping people learn how to get a slice.
Kogan Page is the publisher of your book, and is Kogan Page an independent press, a small traditional publisher, or an imprint of a larger traditional publishing company?
They're traditional, and they only publish business and academic books. So that is their specialty. They're based out of London and New York City. And my book, while it's about travel, it's technically classified as a business book, which is how I fell in with Kogan Page. They've been wonderful.
Did you write the manuscript of your book while traveling and or while moving from one place to the next?
I wrote it from a number of countries. Yes, I was, it was kind of half and half. So for up until April of this year, I had an apartment in the Netherlands as a home base, and I used that to travel around Europe and go back home to the US where I'm from. And then in April, my husband and I got rid of all of our stuff and our apartment, and we've been fully nomadic since then. So I wrote the book from January to end of July was the end of the editing process. So kind of January to July, I think I probably wrote from, 5 or 6 countries. And it was great inspiration. It's not, I feel very privileged as an author to be able to write about something while doing that thing. And that thing of traveling is so stimulating and such a nice way to write.
How many languages are you fluent in? I asked this question because you've probably been to so many places where English is either not the primary language or almost spoken by nobody.
Yeah, I'm only fluent in English, which is my native language, so it's not no great accomplishment there. But I speak some Dutch, and I can get by in a bit in Spanish. I speak what I kind of describe as traveler's Spanish, being able to order food, buy bus tickets, get directions. And I studied French for 4 years, but the last few times I was in France, it felt really useless. It wasn't coming back to mind very quickly.
Now, you might have already answered this question, but what is a digital nomad?
Yeah, that's a great question, Aaron. There's kind of multiple definitions. The really hard black and white answer of what is a digital nomad. It's a person who works online, that's the digital, and then nomadic just means that they don't have a home, so they're always traveling from place to place. And I like to encourage people to think of digital nomadism as, I think that's a term that's expanded. You don't have to be nomadic to be a digital nomad. You can keep a home base and travel. Like, let's say you just want to go away for January every year. So, you just want to skip winter. You go and book an Airbnb, in the Caribbean and work remotely from there. I think that those people are also digital nomads. Anyone who works online and even sometimes exercises the freedom to travel. I think that they're as much a part of the community as the people who have been traveling really, long term, in depth, with no things, only traveling with, 2 backpacks or 2 suitcases. I think there's room for everyone.
Now, is digital nomadism a relatively new phenomenon associated with the rise of social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok? Or has digital nomadism been around for a while?
It's been around for decades, actually. Most people don't know that. Most people think it probably came around, the 2010s, whenever Wi-Fi started being popular everywhere. But in reality, it goes back to 1983 when the first digital nomad, his name is Stephen K. Roberts, and I was lucky to get to interview him for the book. He was really a great source to interview. He started doing this in 83, and I actually found digital nomads and interviewed them and told their stories in the book from every decade. From Stephen in the 80s, Rob Palmer, a digital nomad in the 90s. He did it with his children, and now his children are digital nomads with their children. So they're actually the second generation of digital nomad children. That's how old this movement is. And then in the early 2000s, 2010s, and the 2020s, there are stories told from 5 decades of nomadism, which is what I think just goes to show that this lifestyle is it's here to stay.
Yeah, keep in mind the mobile technology of the 1980s would have consisted of pre-digital cell phones, and the first laptop-ish computer that I can remember being mass market. Well, this would have been before I was born, so it would have been several years before I was born. I was born in 1990. Would have been like the Tandy 100 that was basically a slab about the size of a laptop, but it wasn't a clamshell type that we know nowadays, and it had like a small LCD screen on top and above the keyboard, and you could really only use like text-based applications with it.
Yeah, it's evolved really, really rapidly if you look at that time span from the 90s to now. But in the 80s, the first really portable computer came out, and I forget the exact model name. It's the Radio Shack something. Radio Shack, I don't even think it exists.
I think it was the Tandy 100, but I might be wrong.
I think I have it in the book because it's the computer that Stephen, the first digital nomad, it's the computer that he used. So there is one from 83, and that was the first really portable model. And you were able to actually, instead of, this was internet really, or the internet we know today didn't exist, and pre-Wi-Fi for sure. So he sent messages through a payphone. He had suction cups that he connected to his computer and then connected to both ends of a payphone. It was called an acoustic coupler, and that's how he sent his writing. He's also a writer. He's a fantastic writer. And that's how he sent his articles, which is such a radically different experience from being a digital nomad today, where we can write and send articles from, a computer essentially in our hand. Our cell phones are really entire computers in our pockets. It's incredible.
What is your advice for someone who is relatively happy, as i.e., happy enough or happy for now in their normal life, but still wants to become a digital nomad?
I would say that you don't have to be unhappy. And that's kind of a misconception. At least it was in 2017 whenever I started telling people at my job, people in my network, started telling them I'm going to quit my job, get rid of my apartment and all my stuff, and I'm going to travel full time as a digital nomad. People sometimes said something along the lines of, "Is life here so bad?" And I think the point never needs to be that life is so bad. It's allowed to be that you just want more. I think sometimes life feels like a whistle and you want it to feel like a symphony. You want to be in love with life. And I think that no one should feel like they need to be miserable before they make a big change.
Is being a digital nomad for everyone? That is my final question.
Oh, that's a great question. And I would say it's not for everyone. If any of the listeners think, well, I don't like to travel, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a homebody and preferring a routine at home. And even for people who do like to travel, it doesn't mean that the digital nomad lifestyle is perfect because traveling, if you look at traveling full time, it's an incredible amount of work. You're always looking at where am I going to go next, what country, where am I going to stay, how am I going to book my flights there. It's a lot of administration, and I think that people who feel tired by that or they just want to relax, it's not a relaxing lifestyle. So I think it's important to think about what you want out of the experience. And I don't believe in any way that digital nomadism is like the way to live. It's the way that I like to live right now, and it's the way I've been living for years, but I don't think that everyone needs to see it as like the right thing to do.
I'm sort of the exact opposite of a digital nomad. I guess you could say a digital hermit,
Oh,
for lack of a better term, because I almost never leave my house unless I have to run an errand like grocery shopping or something like that. And pretty much everything I do as part of my author brand is online. So I'm sort of the opposite of a digital nomad, and I am the kind of person who being a digital nomad would not be for me because traveling far from home is quite uncomfortable for me.
yeah, I understand that. I think that there's not any, some people say that, traveling is, the best, the best experience of ever. And I think, no, no, it's not. It is for you, for me, and maybe it is for them, but it's not for everyone. And I think that it's nice to talk about it that way with that kind of, unpretentiousness. I think it's really important.
Kayla, you were a wonderful guest for the Heartland Author podcast, and I thank you for appearing on here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Aaron. It was great.
I'm going to issue a correction here. The model of computer that Kayla and I were talking about was the Tandy TRS-80 Model 100, which was one of the first portable computers that could transmit data over phone lines. The first portable computer that could transmit data over phone lines, however, was the Epson HS-20, which debuted in 1982, a year before the Tandy 100 debuted, although the Tandy 100 was far more successful in the market and was popular among journalists of that era. I'll include links to YouTube videos about the Epson HS-20 and the TRS-80 Model 100 in the text description of this episode. With that said, Kayla was a wonderful guest, and I wish her well with her upcoming book. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Facebook at AuthorAAC and on Instagram at AACScribe. Copyright 2023, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.